The global trade landscape is being rewritten as President Trump unleashes a fresh wave of steep tariffs hitting allies and adversaries alike, with punishing import taxes. Even the so-called winners, countries that cut deals to avoid the harshest levies, will still pay more than they did before, leaving nearly everyone worse off, including the American consumer. Let's head to Sydney now. We're joined by Professor Tim Harcourt from UTS, host of the Airport Economist channel right here on Ticker. Good to see you, sir. What's the logic behind Trump's Liberation Day tariffs now that we've seen them play out?
Well, there is no logic. It seems quite a random process, and as you say, there's no winners in trade wars. And ironically, Aaron, is that you see countries that have been quite favourable to the Trump administration, countries like Taiwan, they've invested significantly in the US semiconductor industry. You know, they've been hit with very high tariffs, like Switzerland have. And yet, countries like Australia only have been, have the 10% remaining. So it seems a very random process, and ultimately will be very harmful to the Americans.
Interesting that Switzerland's been caught up in this as well, but you mentioned Australia. There's no sign of a meeting between Anthony Albanese and Donald Trump, but there almost didn't need to be one because Australia ended up with 10%.
Yeah, I actually think in some ways Prime Minister Albanese and his government, by going pretty quiet, not criticising President Trump, it seems that it sort of worked in a sense. The leaders who had been very critical of him before his election are the ones getting punished. And I think Prime Minister Albanese not having a meeting, not making a lot of noise, seems to be quite a good strategy so far. Having said that, I mean, who knows? The pharmaceutical benefits scheme's always been in the sights of all American administrations, not just President Trump. So we're okay for now, but I'm interested to see what might happen on pharmaceuticals down the track.
How do the tariffs differ from past trade strategies? Because usually it doesn't work, but in this case, many are saying that Trump has pulled off a victory here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, ultimately, putting on tariffs on countries is like putting rocks in your own harbour. You ultimately hurt your own workers and your own consumers and your own farmers and so on. He seems to not see it in economics. He seems to see it as a negotiation strategy where you basically put something on the table and you get people to come to you to negotiate it off. And by doing that, he makes himself the centre of the world trading system instead of the WTO. Having said that, even he's complained that he's going to have to now do 200, 300 deals, which is maybe resource-wise not possible. But certainly some countries have been going to him. Countries that weren't necessarily favourable to the United States are actually able to do some quite reasonable deals compared to others.
Which is interesting you say that. Who are the biggest losers in the tariff war?
Well, the United States, first of all, but some of the countries like Canada, that we never thought that the US would target Canada when we're thinking of the election campaign. They've now got a 35% tariff, although, Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, there's pretty canny and he knows how to play the game in terms of world trade. The European Union looked to be on the receiving end of some pretty harsh medicine, but they've now sort of almost capitulated and they've got a better deal than what we expected. And ironically, we thought the target was always going to be China, but China's managed to, in some ways, negotiate a reasonable situation for itself. So, there's sort of been unintended consequences of this sort of blanket tariff chaos that we're seeing from the Trump administration.
Yeah, it's been an interesting reporting season, hasn't it, with many CEOs not wanting to mention the elephant in the room with tariffs there as a reason why their businesses have been impacted. But the next 6 months will be really, really telling. Professor Tim Harcourt, appreciate your thoughts here on Ticker. Thanks for dropping by.
Thank you so much, Aaron.